Good evening, this is AOD Institute of Education. It's the Diploma of Alcohol and Other Drugs, and tonight we're on third session of three, CHCDIV002, Promote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Cultural Safety. So just as usual, with especially for this module, we'll do the acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, AOD Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. So just to start off, we'll just do the housekeeping as usual. Fairly straightforward. And when in class, cameras on, mics off, break times every hour for about 10 minutes. With class participation, we love to interact. We need the interaction. It's important to explore issues together. So with that, with class participation, use the reactions icon underneath the video and just put your hand up there. That's really helpful. And respect, because obviously respectful relationships are important. Be mindful and kind with the words. Respect the opinion of others. We're all learners and in this together. It's really important. Obviously, respectful relationships. No smoking or vaping or drinking alcohol on camera. Just leave it to your own time. It's just like a staff meeting or a TAFE class, really. Not to be done in here, as if you were in the real room. And triggers, we don't want to trigger anybody with that, with any physical triggers. We don't want to trigger any emotional triggers neither. A lot of the content can be triggering enough, overwhelming enough. So just look after yourself and make an effort not to trigger anyone else. Most of all, be kind to yourself. So yes, looking after everyone else, but most of all, be kind to yourself. Make time for other activities that nourish your mind and soul, so that you feel refreshed and ready for class each week. Obviously, we looking at this every week. The way that the course changes is one way. The government has the input every few months, a few times every year, and says that they want certain things updated, certain knowledge or skills need to be updated. So that's one way. The other way is with learner feedback. If we don't get any learner feedback, then we can't update the course. Well, we can. It's not going to be in line with what learners are wanting. So obviously, leaving a Google review is going to help. And definitely, if you leave me a 5-star review, that'd be fantastic. But it's important to give us the feedback that guides the future of the course over the next few months. So we thank you for that. And now this session. So first of all, looking at breaking untruths of Aboriginal communities today, the myths that are built on preconceived ideas, I guess. Effective partnerships, how and why. That's effective partnerships for the Indigenous community and with the Indigenous community, effective being things get done, and resources to promote effective partnerships and deliver programs that are culturally safe and encourage increased participation. Just reminding again, culturally safe isn't being culturally aware. It's not about having knowledge of other cultures, but culturally safe is knowing that we're different cultures, but saying that that culture that's different to my own, it means that it's going to be safe around me. your culture is safe, even though we're completely different cultures. So bringing it all together, the 3 sessions, we've got 2 before this week. How can we use all this information to improve our practice, and how can we use this information to improve what our agencies do and to improve their practices as well? So looking over community services, services designed with mainstream Australia in mind are unlikely to cater for the needs of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people. That's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just that with the cosmopolitan nature of Australia, multicultural, the massive melting pot that is the melting pot that is Australia, with all the different cultures, because it's trying to accommodate many, many cultures, then it's not going to be necessarily culturally specific or culturally supportive for an individual culture itself. While the ideal situation is one in which community services for Indigenous people are provided by properly trained and qualified Indigenous people, this will not always be possible. So somebody who is like me I'm going to feel more comfortable in a service that provides something for me with somebody who is like me. It's not always possible, and it doesn't always help. Sometimes we might have had a few issues with people of our own culture, so we might be looking for somebody who is not like us to gain access to a service from them. So if I'm male, white, then I might be looking for somebody that isn't necessarily male, isn't necessarily white, isn't necessarily Pommy or Australian culture. I'm wanting something different. And that'll go for any culture. We might go for somebody completely different, but because of Indigenous community being, because of the trauma that they've gone through by certain cultures, then they're going to be looking for somebody that they can be at one with, really. So when we look at effective partnerships, we're supporting the development of effective partnerships between staff, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and their communities. It's essential for cultural safety in the service. When we're talking about staff, this module isn't just about Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander members as our clients, and they are coming to us for service, because in our society, we're part of their society, we've got the society together. So they are working with us, they're our colleagues quite often. So it's about working with them, working for them, having them work with us. And it's, as I said earlier, the cultural safety element is not about knowing somebody else's culture. It's about knowing that our cultures might be different, but remembering and highlighting the fact that their culture is safe with me. It's not about being self-righteous about my culture. It's about making sure that they feel safe with their culture around me, even though I'm completely different. So when we develop meaningful mutual respect and trust, we are ensuring that there will be increased participation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families. Due to the unique cultural heritage of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, services must make sure they are including their perspectives, which means if we have a bright idea of some community support that we want to put in place, we're not going to impose it on them. We're not going to dictate what they need. And it goes right across all of community services. So many of us, so many community services and leaders are putting programs in place because we think it's a great idea for them, whether it's a youth work program or a seniors program, an NDIS program. We've not actually referred to the clients or the people, the user base. We haven't consulted them. We haven't talked to them. We haven't figured out what they think they need. And that's vital, that we're engaging with the specific culture, the specific community, to understand what they perceive that they need. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families will be looking for a sense of connection with their community and cultural heritage. So services must make this apparent in the physical environment, as well as the social connections of the service. The main reason that we're doing acknowledgement of country with every session, it's important to include the cultural safety policy to acknowledge the custodians of the land. Every business, every service in Australia is meant to have a cultural safety policy for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And part of that cultural safety policy is that an acknowledgement of country could be used. There might be plenty of other things that are done. And just because an acknowledgement of country is done as a high point of the service or the meeting, it doesn't necessarily mean that the service is culturally safe. So acknowledgement of country is one element, but it's not the be all and end all, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to help. It should be displayed at the entrance of the service and should be included in service websites, newsletters, and so on. So it's almost as if that could be the baseline, but there's going to be a lot more needed than that. That's all right, Nepal. Yes, we're doing DIV002, the last session. But there's so little left to do. I'm going to jump onto next week's module later on. Not quite sure when yet, but I was wanting to talk a lot about next week's module. So culturally safe services. Services should place an emphasis on visual art, dance, music, song, ceremony, and ritual because these things are so integral to the characteristics of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, meaning that where a black and white, just loads of words, leaflet about the service that's going out, it might seem boring to us, advertising a service or advertising an event. It's just a standard boring leaflet. We might look at it and think, yeah, maybe I might be interested in that. It would turn off Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, Indigenous cultures even more than it turns us off. So if there's no colour, there's no creativity in it, there's no connection with land, connection with country on the leaflet or the advert, then they're just going to be turned off because it's got to spark inspiration. So the service needs to be aware of the current health issues that affect the population in their area and in other areas, including how the history of Australia impacted and still impacts on Indigenous health. So with strategies and reviewing, are we welcoming Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families? What are the first impressions when entering our service? Again, if an office or a reception has got, it's just blank walls, it's not colourful, it's got maybe no video or TV, multimedia, if it's just pretty boring, it might put us off, but it's even more to the point going to put off somebody that's extremely creative, meaning the Indigenous cultures. Do our resources meet the specific needs of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander families? If it's not welcoming and it's not going to be somewhere they can engage with, the chances are they're not going to get very far into it, and they're going to realize as they walk in the door that this is not where I'm going to be able to get the service that I need. Are we open at times that Aboriginal families can access our service? It's difficult if somebody's travelled across the city or they've travelled from another town or suburb, and by the time they get there, our service is shut. So if shopping and childcare needs doing in the morning, and then by the time somebody takes a a commute to get to our service. It's the middle of the afternoon and we've closed at 2 or 3. That's not really going to help anybody. So it's just bearing in mind our clients, if they are coming from a further afield, we're going to need to be open a little bit later. So with resources, cultural awareness is important, not necessarily cultural safety, but being aware of their culture and understanding that things, their language, their perspectives, that needs to be evident on the paperwork, the advertising. Government health websites providing data on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health and education. Obviously, looking at government statistics is going to help. Government health data is looking into government health data is going to help us guide the service and put a service in place and help somebody that's looking into this. And the Department of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Policies website. So we, in our service, we're going to have the policies and procedure, but as well as engaging with the elders in the community, we can also go straight to the key department in government and start from there and then engage with the specific community that we're wanting to work with. Also looking at the Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation. All of these different policymakers are going to be important when we're trying to put a service in place. I'll give you the link for the video just in case the recording doesn't get to you. So that's the website there. I'll throw it in chat. Oops. Didn't work. Just a couple of videos tonight. This one and another one. So resources to promote the partnerships. As I said, it might be our service working with an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander agency. It might be that we are working with Indigenous people as our staff. It might be that our service is putting on an event or putting on a service for the community, the Indigenous community. So this partnership is so many different sides. Obviously, we're going to need to be dipping into the education resources. That's going to help. And as I said, looking at contacting, engaging with, a bit like the assessment that you've got, local Indigenous community member, which is kind of why that assessment is important. It's a bit. If you've got an assessment to do that says go and talk to a local Indigenous community member, and we are not engaging with somebody in the community that's an Indigenous community member, then it's a bit strange when we have to go out into our jobs and then put on the service for people who are Indigenous communities. So it's very helpful to yourself to make sure that you know where the Indigenous community leaders are and the people that will be there ready to engage with somebody that's wanting to know more information. So resources, again, there's several services that provide cultural safety training. Consultants, there's always somebody there trying to trying to be ready to engage with the support. Mainly the aim to improve the quality of service delivered, to improve the experience, and to improve the experience of services for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, to deliver programs that are culturally safe and encourage increased participation. Services need to document ways to support the delivery of programs that are culturally safe and encourage increased participation. Ideally, incorporating appropriate resources, appropriate being the key word, the appropriate resources. On the back of all of that, we are supporting all of that, supporting our engagement, supporting the service that's putting on the event, or supporting the service that's putting on the partnership with the Indigenous community. We've got our policy and procedure there. So whatever agency we're in, the government said we've got to have a cultural safety policy. If it's the policy, then we've got to have a procedure and how we put that policy into practice. So how do we make sure that the procedure is working for everybody? Obviously, if it's a policy, then it's going to need reviewing, it's going to need updating, it's going to need a working party in any organisation that is going to review the policies and procedures and update them as necessary. The agency or the organisation putting the policy and procedure into practice, or the P's, if there's no Aboriginal staff, there might not be Aboriginal staff. That's a perfect example of why engagement with key community leaders is going to help. So if we don't have Aboriginal staff on site, then we might be going into the community local to our organisation and trying to get consultants from the community to help. Representatives of all staff as well, and communication and support within the local Aboriginal community. The strategies outlined in a cultural safety policy must include an agreed set of outcomes against which the strategies can be measured. So the policies and procedures and the policy fundamentals, it's going to be agreed, and all of the outcomes, the mission statement, everything about it must be agreed. And the goals, what's it for? If there's no agreed goals, then how are we going to be able to figure out whether it's a successful policy or whether it's going to work? How do we know whether it's going to work next year just because it might or might not have worked this year? And if we can't measure it, we don't know whether it did. Service programs and curriculum should also be evaluated regularly against the desired outcomes of the cultural safety strategies. You will obviously get these slides, and looking at policy and procedure is important. I'll just skip on a few here though. As I said, the outcomes need to be clearly defined, so not defined, so that we can know whether it's been met every period or every year. Quite often, if the goals aren't met, if the goals and the targets for the service aren't met, then there's no budget next year. So it's got to be, we've got to know how to review, we've got to know how to evaluate the service that we're putting on. Obviously, we're going to interact with the community, with the service user, feedback forms, surveys, trying to understand what kind of service we put on and whether it's actually met the objectives. When I mentioned about it's got to be creative, and it's got to people understand it's for their culture, it's culturally relevant. There is an assessment that talks a little bit about Indigenous culture. So this is kind of a point to one of the assessments that talks about comparing Indigenous culture with your own culture. What does colour mean in the two different cultures? What does certain shapes mean? And comparing the two cultures. And so this is quite a helpful video. Self-determination we use it quite a lot in community services, in AOD and mental health area. So it's when people regain control of their own life, when they used to feel overwhelmed and their world feels out of control. Once they get some self-determination, some self-advocacy, they start to be able to take control of their own life again. It's a great word that is used quite a lot, but we quite often might say self-advocacy and mix the two together. Different, but we would still use them. Self-determination involves the transfer of decision-making power from the government to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. It means creating programs and resources that can assist them in rebuilding their own decision-making capabilities. So where somebody might be used to relying on somebody else for the service to be put on, when somebody starts to get the self-determination, they can start to understand how their world is working and how start to figure out how to access the programs that they need. With the ASTIC, has had many names over the years and is now known as the Prime Minister and Cabinet, which was Aboriginal people requested the right to administer their own communities. The federal government agreed, and a central Aboriginal administrator called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission was created. So that is the thing that's now called the Prime Minister and Cabinet. Controlling, really. It is still controlling Indigenous affairs. The National Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisation supports Indigenous autonomy, creating healthy futures for the next generations, and the mainstream services are not always appropriate for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I'll put this one in as well. It's quite a lot. Okay, so looking at language and literacy, obviously, when we talk about communication, if two partnerships are wanting to work together, whether that's client and service, or whether that's two services working together, the communication is going to be extremely important and how that happens, how that gets on. Language is the way to communicate. So if language is not working how we need it to, then and it's not delivering what we need it to, then it's not going to work. We need to speak the same cultural language, not necessarily the same verbal language. So there's currently projects and ongoing programs through Australia to preserve those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages currently spoken and to revive many of the languages lost. For some Indigenous people who have kept their language alive, English is a second language, which means we need to, it's not about them learning English so that they can read our advertising, so that they can read our notices. It's about us trying to engage with them. As I said, it can create obvious communication difficulties. It's essential to use an interpreter in this instance. Interpreter and translator maybe is needed. Interpreter being for spoken language and translator for documents and paperwork. Quite often an elder or family member can be asked to act as an interpreter. In some cases, a trained and qualified interpreter might be used. With any interpreter that's needed when English is a second language, or people that don't originate from Australia and there's a language barrier, ideally we don't use a family member because of certain conflict of interest, and they're not necessarily going to interpret what is being said by both parties. So a registered interpreter would try to be used nearly every time. You can still get Indigenous registered interpreters. They would, as it says, they would be a key member of the community. But as said, it's not necessarily going to be a local family member that's going to just jump in and act as an interpreter. Most of all, take the time to build rapport, introduce in a warm and friendly manner, ask about the country they are from, not necessarily the nationality, but their country. What country? What is your country? Share stories of interest, show respect, check need for a translator, be body language appropriate. If it's a senior Indigenous member, they might not want to be wanting to eye-to-eye contact. It might be more appropriate for them if they don't look in the eye or in the face. Doesn't mean they're wanting to pull away. It's just that's the way they might respond. And also introducing yourself in a warm and friendly manner might not mean shaking hands, maybe no physical contact at all. So that's just being culturally relevant. Listen, avoiding complex words, explain why you need to ask any questions, check that they understand, general paraphrasing, active listening. If needed, use diagrams and images. That's always going to be useful. Be mindful of your non-verbal communication, facial expressions and body language. As I said, eye contact may not be appropriate. Silence is valued. So just because two people are there doesn't mean there has to be talking all the time and silence gets filled with pointless words. It's not necessarily important. Shame, deeply felt feelings of being ashamed or embarrassed of who they are as a person, as an Indigenous member, as somebody that's been through a community that's had trauma over many generations. It piles up and it can be very, very significant. For Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people may result from sharing private or personal information, cultural beliefs, and from breaches of confidentiality. Build relationships within the local community and learn suitable and generally accepted words. Remember that you need to understand local protocol. In Western culture, we place an emphasis on meeting deadlines and schedules. Time is perceived different in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. Value is placed on family responsibilities and community relationships. consider flexible consultation times, take the time to explain and do not rush the person. Meaning, if you have arranged to meet with a client, then their focus is on it's on the meeting that they're going to attend with us, but it's also on many, many other things. And just because they don't put our meeting at the top of the list and they're not on time doesn't mean it wasn't important. It might be vitally important to them, but they might not be on time. They might be an hour late because they had other things to do as well. And that doesn't degrade the value that they put on the meeting. It just meant that they had plenty of things to do. The fact that they were there says more about their attendance than the fact that they were late. So this is pretty much what we've looked at today. That's pretty much it for this. I'll look at the assessments again in a sec. I'll just get everything ready. All right, so we've been over this a couple of times. We've got, come on. This is the assessments for this module, and they've crashed. Hold on. All right, so the next module is CHCDIV002 Provide Systems Advocacy Services.
Yep.
The Diploma of Mental Health have just finished this module, which means they are starting to do this presentation. In groups, it says, this is an online session to be scheduled by your assessor. So you want you and three other people, ideally.
Okay.
Three other learners
Three.
with the assessor. It's not a class presentation. It's like you and three other members book in with me or somebody else to do your presentation. And let me get the objectives. What is it all about?
Yep.
Here we go. So you've got to find a community service that you want to put on for a cultural community group, whoever it's been, and you've got to basically use these statements to guide it.
Okay.
So who are the key stakeholders? Who's the committee members? What's the project outcomes? What's the goals? Goals different to outcomes. What's the context of it? And then provide one strategy to improve the service delivery. So if it's maybe it might already be run in the community, how could you improve that?
Yep.
Okay. Improve quad. Yeah. Carry on. Go on.
Yeah, okay. So this has to be booked with the assessor, or how it will be like, because three of the team member or the students, one me, and the fifth person is like the assessor. So everyone has to be under the same platform.
Recording back on. Once you've got your group together, you contact Hader, me, or I don't know, somebody at LSO or another staff member to arrange a time slot.
Okay.
And we can
So,
usually,
yep.
yeah.
Yeah, so doing how it will be like, because I'm just like confused to whom I can approach for this project, right? I'm just feeling, I mean, the previous one, when it comes to like project, I'm just running out of with the teammates, because it's very difficult to coordinate with, students all around. So as you can see in today class, also me and Tamara is there, right? If it's gonna be like three students, so How can I arrange? And it's very difficult to be on the same platform at once.
Yeah, totally. But just because they're not in this group tonight or last week or next week
Yep.
doesn't mean they're not doing the class. So I think this class has got 30 people in it. So there's 30 people that all need to do this assessment.
Okay.
The diploma of mental health, as I said, they're starting to do it now because they've finished the module.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably got an equivalent number. I don't know whether maybe the Diploma of Youth Work and the Diploma of Community Services are all doing this one as well. I
Mm-hmm.
might check on that in a minute. So there's a lot of people doing this assessment, but you're
Okay.
not necessarily going to see them in the class, and you might have to contact them on Discord.
Okay.
Or now and again, I do get emails from people looking for like another group member or can they join a group, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's another option.
Okay.
So there's a few different options there, but Discord, this is ideally what we wanted Discord for, so that you guys can find people to join a group.
Okay, so in short, I can approach people on Discord, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, use on the screen there, use that module code. You need
Okay.
a group member or group members
Mm-hmm.
for the presentation, provide systems advocacy services.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the more people you have,
Mm-hmm.
the less the workload is for each of the individual members, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, but whether it's a youth work program, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the AOD that you like focused
Yep.
on at the moment. The
Mm-hmm.
last presentation you had it was that one in PRP002, and you
Yeah,
had
it's
to
still
look at
pending. Yeah, it's still pending for the project and the funding part. So
but
that's why
that
it's very
was
difficult. Yeah.
yeah, that was specifically for like an AOD service. This one doesn't have to be an AOD service. It could be anything.
Okay.
Um, like it's pretty vague, not vague, broad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, if
Okay.
you need anything, if anybody needs a group or needs help putting a group together, then just email me. If you need to arrange a time, then obviously email me as well.
Okay,
Um,
so I'm gonna email you regarding the group because it's very difficult for me to find people
yeah,
on, right? So no,
yeah,
but no worries. So it will be like two, or I mean, two or three students, you and me, right? Total five people, right?
yeah.
Okay, all good then. I will email you.
Cool.
Yep,
All
thank
good.
you. Yep.
No problem. Have you looked into it much, Tamara?
Not this one. I have been catching up on a heap though, so I actually feel
It's
like I
fine.
can get this diploma done within the year. So this one
Cool.
will not be high on my list because I've got three
No,
others
that's all
that
right.
I'm
Yeah.
smashing out at the moment. So
Well, this could be like I'm going to stop recording. Okay, so I'll just read down the assessments just in case anybody's missed any detail of the past few weeks. Um, sorry, got a throat sweet in my mouth. What legislation protect the cultural safety of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia? So you have to pick out the right ones. As usual, don't worry if you get them wrong. Have a go. We've got 3 goes, and then whether it's me or one of the learning support will advise you where you're going wrong. 2, research cultural celebrations, one from a First Nations culture and one from another culture different to your own. Complete the following table. This is what I was meaning when I was mentioning the creativity video. So creativity in music and color and art, very important in this one. For each of the following historical issues, describe what happened and the impact of this on First Nation communities today. So what was the issue? What happened there? And then what's the impact today? So taking the history and taking it into the modern day context. Loss of land and culture. What happened there? Not just that they lost land and culture, but what was the issue? So it says, describe, tell us a story in there. Stolen generation. What happened there? Good description in there and how it impacts today. Introduction of alcohol. Remembering that there was no real strongly fermented drinks before the settlers arrived. Obviously, there was lightly fermented fruit juices, but nothing as toxic as the strength of alcohol that was brought over on the ships. So, what happened there, and how's that impacted today? And the introduction of disease, obviously the epic proportions that's brought on, and then how that's affected today. Number 4, provide a brief explanation of how colours are used in First Nation art. Again, mentioned in the video. There's 2 types of activities you could organise for a group that reflect First Nation art and colours. Why is kinship important in First Nation society? Again, pick out the right ones or pick out the wrong ones and somebody will help you with it. What is one issue for traditional kinship in modern day Australia? There's 2 things about your own culture that may affect the way you perceive others. There's 2 ways you ensure that your work practices are not affected by your own cultural bias. List 2 local community agencies or groups that assist services to develop partnerships with First Nation families. And finally, describe 3 potentially sensitive issues that relate to sharing information about First Nation culture. So pick 3 and describe them. It's not just a list. You've got to describe each one. List 2 ways you can ensure the communications are culturally appropriate. So there's a difference there between list. There's a difference there between describe and list. A lot more detail in these than these. Okay, so looking at the second assessment, that's this one. Few little points to it. Watch the YouTube, and it's kind of a research project. There's a lot of research to be done for the module. It's research focused, really. So start watching the YouTube and then just go through, answer each of the questions. Some need more detail, like explain, detailed explanation there, opinion. So that's assessment 2. Assessment 3, research project of an individual member of the Indigenous community. I mentioned a few ideas with Mitch Tambo last week, so if you need any resources for that, just email me and send you some stuff out. Otherwise, it's talk to the key community member. And rather than just wondering what on earth you're going to talk about, this is what you need to talk about. If you print this off or copy the pointers and then show them what it is that you need to talk about, they'll be much more open to actually having a conversation rather than saying, would you mind chatting with me for half an hour about culture? If it's not pinned down and it's not specific, you might not get as much feedback. And finally, the 4th assessment is reflection. So this is all research. You're studying, and now you're going to reflect on what you've found. Reflecting on a lot about your own culture, what it is about your own culture that is important, what it is that compares with other cultures, and what have you learned about your own culture, and what have you learned about other cultures, that type of thing. So with that, we'll just leave this session there, and next week we're going to start a new module.